Folks, I'm really honored to be exploring the radical side of Jesus today with my new friend and comrade, Andrew Springer. Andrew, welcome to Monks and Punks.
Thank you. It's a delight to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Listen, Andrew, you are totally unique because not only are you a comrade in the Democratic Socialists, but you're also an Emmy award-winning journalist who got an Emmy award when you were at Good Morning America, and you're the founder of Notice News, which is a lefty progressive news service. And more importantly, for our common ground, you're running this Substack called the Jesus Movement and co-sponsoring our big event, micro conference on the radical Jesus on the 22nd of February. And I'm so honored that you were the first co-sponsor. So tell us why you co-sponsored our conference.
Well, I think the work that you guys are doing is incredibly important, and we need to get this message out there. We need to confront Christian nationalism most explicitly, but Christian fascism, fascism more generally, and just sort of conservative reactionary theology that causes so much harm and violence in the world. Come with me to any gay space. I'm also a homosexual, if you didn't notice. And you, you
Mother
will
can always
see.
tell.
You will see what that kind of theology does to little boys and girls and nems that are told that they're going to hell, and the rates of self-harm and suicide and drug abuse, and alcohol abuse, all this harm that this terrible theology is doing on the world, and we need to confront that. And I applaud you guys and your work for this, and we're excited to be part of it. And I say we like there's some other like it to me. It's just me. I just run a Substack. That's not like I'm not the king over here. I don't even
I think
believe
we
you
represent.
guys.
I think we represent the silent majority.
I think so too. You know, I think there's a real, and you tell me what you think too. But like, I think there's a real cognitive dissonance. People read, especially growing up, they read the Bible, they read the Gospels, and they found that truth. They're like, oh man, this Jesus, this guy's got something figured out. I think that people growing up, they read the Bible, they read the words of Jesus, and they say, hey, this rings true. I really identify with this. Give your money to the poor, turn the other cheek. Do unto others, and then you go to church or you turn on Fox News and you see Christians and they're like, well, wait a second, did we not read the same Bible?
Hmm.
Like, am I an idiot? Did you guys not get this memo? Like, because this seems like this would be more important than
Absolutely.
abortion or gay marriage, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
Um, so I
There's
think we
two.
are the silent majority.
Let's put a pin in the queer side of Jesus and come back to that because I think that's one of
Okay.
the most radical things we could talk about today. But I'm going to come back to that and just respond to what you're talking about right now. You're talking about the gulf between the message of Jesus and the practice of Christianity. And I think theologically, we have so much in common. We're both reading people like Dominic Crozon and Bart Ehrman. Bart Ehrman, a former evangelical who now is a academic and a critic of the deification of Jesus, and
Mhm.
not that I deny a possible divinity of Jesus personally. I'm still kind of agnostic about this question, but I think when you over deify or get this, over objectify Jesus, kind of like the way men objectify women, that if you make Jesus's divinity into a thing, then you are making a quantum leap far away from the message of the Sermon on the Mount: do unto others, turn the other cheek, radical communal sharing, early communal communism, even you could argue. And so when I say the silent majority, I'm obviously paraphrasing Nixon, and it's kind of a quantum leap of my own. But I think what I mean to say is that there is obviously a majority of people who have read the New Testament and have felt the radical fire. And it's the opposite of the modern ice, the modern frozen consciousness. And so that's what I love your work. I love what you're writing about a lot with your Substack. And I know that's how I know that we're both reading Bart Ehrman. So where to go next? We could talk about Bart Ehrman, or we'll eventually get to talk about the
Well,
queer nature of Jesus too. So
well, I mean, uh, look, I think that's the point, right? That the point is that the powers that be, the ruling class, want us to debate the theological questions. They want us to debate Christ's nature. They want us to debate heaven. They want us to debate the Bible. Because if we're debating and fighting each other on these issues that, quite frankly, do not matter, we're not turning over tables. We're not working to bring God's kingdom. We're not holding the powerful to account. We're bogged down and verse by verse, arguments, which is so much of what the comments are on my Substack. Just like, but what about this verse? What about that verse? What about that verse? It's like you're missing the point. You're focused on the trees and not seeing the forest, right? And it's the same thing with the ruling class bullshit when it comes to the culture wars. If we're fighting over trans athletes in sports, which don't get me wrong, is an important issue, it's like we're not talking about healthcare. We're not talking about worker ownership. We're not talking about seizing the means of production. We're talking about why is a woman using a man's bathroom, right?
Right.
And
There's
that
only
gets
so
people
many hours
fired
in the
up.
day, and if you're occupying, your energy on distractions, then you're losing out on being able to do something on other
And
issues.
that's what I think all these theological arguments are distractions. They're really helpful distractions to the ruling class because, again, like you said, we only have so many hours in the day. And if you're hung up on trying to find the right answer on how divine was Jesus, I think you've missed the point.
Right. Right, because if you re-enter into the radical nature of the New Testament, it actually causes you. It's not a question of belief anymore. It's a question of action. What will you do next? How do we create the beloved community? How do we create, or how do we build the religious socialist wing of the DSA? Which is something we also have in common. That's how I met you, because when I wrote Jesus Our Comrade for Maxine and the religioussocialism.org website, they found this great graphic and they gave you credit for it. And then I was like, who's the Jesus movement? I got to Google them. I thought it was this huge cult in Nebraska or something, It's actually mostly one Substack writer in Barcelona. So you're originally from West Virginia and you're the grandson of a preacher?
That is correct. Yeah, I was born and raised in Fairmont, West Virginia, which is right outside of Morgantown. My grandfather was a United Methodist circuit rider, not on a horse, of course. This was in the 60s. And I was not very much I grew up around, my grandparents went to church, but it was United Methodist, like, oh, we sell pies. It was none of the sort of the 80s focus on the family bullshit. It was, just like real community. Then as I got older, I was surrounded by evangelicals in my high school. And I was wrestling with my sexuality and my religion. And there wasn't we don't have the internet. They didn't really have the internet then. And if they did, all you got was the bullshit from Focus on the Family, that sort of stuff, the 700 clubs and sort of thing. And nobody ever said to me, or even brought it up. It was like, oh, maybe Jesus's message wasn't about heaven and hell. Like even Bart Ehrman's book, Heaven and Hell, which I highly recommend, didn't come out until 10 years ago. So you can imagine even 10 years before that, nobody, at least in my little small West Virginia community, there was nothing other than conservative theology. And so I wrestled with that. So my undergrad degree is actually in religion. And I thought about going to journalism school, or I was going to go to seminary. And I said, God, whatever one I get into first, I'll go to. And I got into Columbia for journalism school, and I went there instead. And here we are.
Wow. Okay. So let's dive into some of the more controversial parts of the Jesus Our Comrade article that I wrote, because it's a compendium of the research I've done over the past really 20, 25 years. And there was this speaking of Columbia, a Columbia scholar named Morton Smith who wrote Jesus the Magician, and then he wrote a book about his findings at the Mar Saba Monastery. And he found an early church father, Clement, who writes a letter to Theodore that kind of mentions, in an offhand way, that there is this lost passage of the Gospel of Mark in which Jesus does an initiation of a young man who spends the night with Jesus wearing nothing but a thin garment over his naked body, and it sort of implied a kind of a homoerotic vibration, perhaps.
I've had dreams like that too. I've had dreams like that.
You've had a Jesus dream?
I had a dream like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And it seems, this was a different time. Clement was an early church father based in Alexandria, Egypt, with Origen, and the homophobia and the heteronormativity of the modern age were not really in that reality. And But what's so dramatic is that Morton Smith, the Columbia academic, brought out these findings that might imply Jesus had a bisexual or queer side. And Morton Smith, instead of the findings being evaluated or sifted through, he was attacked for being gay himself when he wasn't. They kind of they tried to kill the messenger. And I myself have found a lot of resistance. That piece was almost edited out. That part of my article was almost edited out of the religious socialism editing process, and I had to really fight for it to keep it in. And I've had people, I'm trying to perhaps start a nonprofit called the Jesus Peace Project. It's something I'm trying to possibly do in the future. Thank you. And I'm getting a lot of no's from nonprofit development people who, if they read the Jesus Our Comrade piece, run screaming from the entire project. So,
based on the gay part or the lost
I think
part?
so. I think I don't know. I try to interview people as they run screaming out the door, and sometimes people won't tell me why they are passing. But so, what is your take on all of this? Is it worth fighting it out? Is it worth discussing? Is it? I think it's I don't want to answer the question and be a good journalist, so I'll stop there. What's your take?
Wait, so specifically about the Mark thing?
Yeah, there's the secret gospel of Mark or the lost gospel of Mark. There's the Morton Smith thing, or really it's kind of about, I think you've, in your own work, let me paraphrase something you wrote recently. I believe it was you who said, modern Christianity focuses on something that Jesus never really even preached about. Modern Christianity focuses on being anti-gay when Jesus would never said anything anti-gay.
Yeah.
In fact, his life seemed to be surrounded by men. He clearly had a very close relationship with John, the disciple that Jesus loved. And who knows what that meant, but it seems to be a variable. It seems to be open. And then the secret gospel of Mark seems to also be a variable, yes, but also kind of more indicative of either that there was a rite of initiation that involved an all-night interaction. It doesn't say it explicitly in the secret gospel of Mark that Jesus actually had gay sex, but there seems to be an implication of an intimate connection, either a ritual of initiation of some sort, a teaching. Teaching the secrets of the kingdom is what the secret gospel of Mark says.
I'm going to start calling my next. That's what I'm going to put on my Grinder profile. I'm just kidding. I'm not on Grinder. The secrets of the kingdom. I will say I am not an expert. I am not a scholar. I'm a journalist first and foremost, so I can't speak with any definitiveness to those specific claims. What I can say is that it was weird that Jesus wasn't married. Like that definitely would not have gone unnoticed. That this guy didn't have a. As far as we know, we don't know if he had a wife. We don't know. We probably didn't, right? Because somehow there would be something left over. We know about his mother. His mother's around after his execution. So why wouldn't his wife be around if he had a wife? If he had kids, like where are they? They're totally missing again because we know he had other family members who were around, notably James. But we also know from Luke, or we can defer from Luke, that there were powerful women who gave him money. So what does that say? I don't know. I do know that the four gospels in the canonical gospels in the Bible are the most historically reliable about Jesus's life because I'm not intimately familiar with the secret gospel of Mark, but those two sort of things tend to come in a century after Jesus' death rather than the decades after Jesus' death. Although, as I'm sure you're aware, the Jesus Seminar, which was a group of scholars who tried to sort of gauge some of the authenticity of the sayings in the canonical gospels, used the Gospel of Thomas to sort of measure against, which is just a collection of Jesus' sayings, which is the Gospel of Thomas.
And what's great about Thomas is that it draws on the Q source, which is the kind of the undiscovered source that Mark and Matthew were also drawing upon. So that's I've also written about Thomas for Huffington Post. I called it the anarchist Jesus of the first gospel or something like that. It was 12 years ago during my Huffington Post years. But yes, anyway, go on.
I will say, I don't know if you're familiar with, there was a Yale historian named John Boswell, but in the 80s, Boswell, Dr. Boswell, produced really the first study of Christian attitudes towards homosexual sex, more so than homosexuality, because homosexuality as an idea doesn't really evolve until later, and how that really doesn't come until around the 500s. So there's real homophobia and bias against homosexual sex in the West, starting around Justinian or so forth. I might be getting these names or these dates wrong. I am not a historian.
But the
And
sixth
then,
century, that's
yeah,
significant.
the and I encourage you to read this or to go look at this book, Christianity, Social Tolerance, or something. But interestingly, he later wrote a book alleging that medieval priests had gay marriages or performed gay marriages for people, and he was absolutely pilloried and sort of cast out from the academy. He was a tenured professor at Yale, but so he couldn't really be. But to a certain degree, he was mocked, he was scorned, and unfortunately, Professor Boswell died of AIDS in 1994 because he himself was a gay man.
Oh,
Um,
that's tragic.
but
That's
his legacy is alive at Yale. They just had a big thing for him a couple years ago. But I encourage you to look at those books because there might be some parallels. It sounds like.
I am going to make a note of that. That sounds amazing because of the parallels as well to Morton Smith, who was attacked.
Yeah.
And I've been also reflecting, that I went out to Taos, New Mexico, looking for secret mystical knowledge, and I studied the tarot,
Love
and I
it.
had this great wise old lady who took me under her wing. She taught me about Freemasonry and tarot and the Rosicrucians and astrology a little bit. And then assigned me books, and said, like, read
Uh-huh.
Jesus the Magician by Morton Smith. But she never, which is great, but she never taught or mentioned the Secret Gospel of Mark book by Morton Smith.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
homophobia, keeps on springing up, even in progressive circles.
Oh, sure.
And the way, and whether you're pro gay or not, it's just interesting to see. I think we can all agree that we all see it's atrocious when we see academic groupthink or the
Oh,
herd
sure.
closes in on the
Yeah.
nonconformist who says, "Hey, I found something really interesting," and then God forbid, mainstream Christian biblical scholars are not very open minded.
They are not, and I will tell you that. So I did a year at Yale Divinity School recently in 2023, and it's the academy really now looks down upon the Jesus movement, excuse me, the Jesus seminar, and sort of the work that Ehrman, not Marcus Borg and so forth did. That's really looked down upon by the academy, and they've decided it's impossible to decipher what Jesus actually said, and so it's not important. However, I think the rest of America is over here. They're like, no, this is really important to us. I really do want this. I was blown away when I found out that Jesus Seminar had put together a Bible that had color coded what they had found and what they thought Jesus had said. And if they were absolutely certain Jesus said this, it was dark red. If it light red or black, Jesus wouldn't say that at all. And that book is hard to find. I mean, now, but like I think a lot of Americans, a lot of progressive, a lot of leftists would say, this is exactly what we want. Jesus, going back to my original point was like, I would go to churches and they don't talk about Jesus or they don't talk about the teachings of Jesus. And it's like, what are we doing here? Isn't this whole religion about Jesus? Like, and so I think the academy in that sense has moved way beyond where, you know, mainline Protestants are, where progressive thinkers are, where American spirituality is. Because too, if you look at some of the polling, people don't like Christians, but they still love Jesus. Like
Ah,
they don't call themselves Christians, but they'd still say, hey, Jesus was a great teacher, or Jesus was a special guy, or Jesus had a special relationship with God. Like all those things. Like I think parts of America are shedding the bullshit of institutional Christianity, what Howard Thurman called the religion about Jesus, to
right.
focus on the religion of Jesus.
Back-to-back podcast people talking about Howard Thurman. We just had Reverend Dr. John Tatominal talking about Howard Thurman. So footnote back to that.
Oh, I can't wait to listen to that.
Yeah. He's really great. He's going to be a great speaker on the February 22nd, the micro conference on the Radical Jesus. And Andrew will be there via Zoom, right? You're going to tune in?
Yes, I will be there. I wouldn't miss it.
That's great, man. Oh, I'm so happy. So let's dive into the controversy around the Jesus Seminar. Yale is obviously very influential because freelance intellectuals like myself, or whatever I am, intellectual activists, whatever, people like myself have heard the aspersions against the Jesus Seminar. What I've heard, and tell me if this is true, is that it was a bunch of academics who would read like a quote from Jesus and then they would vote in the moment on whether they felt it was authentically Jesus or not, which sounds a little bit like scholarship by democracy instead of scholarship by research. What's your take?
Yeah, that's definitely how it worked. They had committees and they would vote. They used little marbles to vote whether or not they thought a saying. And I don't mean just saying. I mean they went through line by line in the New Testament, and and there are certain legitimate questions about um, the credentials of some of the people who were part of that. And I think that questioning is good and important. Um, I think that, however, they provided a piece of scholarship that was desperately missing and is desperately missing. I would love to see the next quest for the historical Jesus, as it's called, to really come back and focus on that.
And the book they produced, tell us the title of the Jesus Seminar book that was produced, or the Bible with the color coding?
Yeah, it's called The Five Gospels.
Oh, great. That's great. I'm glad there's 5 now, because I think Thomas is a magical, totally surreal, anarchistic, it's a wild ride.
Which, by the way, I think, and Robert Funk was the editor of that. He was one of the founders. He's now passed. I think the only person who's still alive is Crozon.
Yeah.
Crozon, if I'm pronouncing his name.
Crozon, yeah, John Dominic Crozon, right.
Yeah. He'll pop up on a Zoom call every once in a while. He's in the 90s.
Yeah. Author, and I know you know his book, Jesus the Revolutionary Biography. It's excellent. I just read it, so yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And I love him, and I love Marcus Borg. I just think the marketing on that piece was terrible. The name of that book is terrible. Like, if I were in Barnes and Noble, The Five Gospels, like, why would the Christian skeptic, the person who wants Jesus without Christianity, why would I pick up that book? I thought it was terribly named.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Let me get my time machine and I'll go back and give them that.
Well, listen, God has given us all this time. We are independent, lefty people. I've got a background in publishing. Maybe it's God's will, like just letting go of all expectations and letting go of all thoughts. Who knows? Maybe you and I are called to do some publishing together. I like the way I like a DSA comrade who also is critical of marketing from the bourgeoisie. The question is, what is some marketing that goes to the masses?
I think that's just as important, if not more important. I think that there's been all this great biblical research and stuff that's been done, and I think Bart Ehrman has been a great messenger to bring that to the audience. He's written several of these books, have been New York Times bestsellers.
Glad you mentioned him. I was going to ask about Bart Ehrman next, actually. Yeah, because when we talk about the Jesus Seminar, I think we connect around the criticism of John. A lot of evangelical right-wingers cling to John. Tell us your take on that.
Well, I'm trying to be polite.
Oh, that's good. That'll be the first time this morning.
I will say, I think that John presents an interesting and advanced view of Jesus.
So true. The philosophical gospel. The Quakers call it the Quaker gospel. I don't know why, but
well, he's anything but quiet.
One thing I could say that's radical about John is that the flipping the tables in the temple is just completely unchronological. John takes it and puts it at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, out of Holy Week, out of the Passion, out of the climactic scenes in Jerusalem, almost to say, like, flipping the tables is really the thing that
Oh
launches
yeah.
Jesus's ministry in my mind. And clearly, it's not literally true. So John is putting us in this kind of mythic Jesus. Anyway, I'm talking too much. Go
hmm
ahead.
No, 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 and you're absolutely right. I think that the line that's difficult for me to walk is part of me wants to be very respectful and say, okay, you believe what you believe, and you're over here. And another part of me wants to say, you've all been brainwashed. Um, and another part of me wants to say, you're doing tremendous harm. Not so much to the message of Jesus, like whatever. I mean, to the little boys and the girls and all this. I have a cousin in South Carolina who would not perform in her high school's production of Chicago because it was too sexual. Because she's been brainwashed by this terrible Christian bullshit that being a sexual being as a woman is bad.
Mm,
And I can't think of a worse thing to lay on a little girl
mm,
than that. To say your body is bad, in addition to you can't control your own body
mm,
and you better cover up or somebody will take advantage of you. But that shit, it's all connected. So part of me wants to say, yeah, it's a beautiful tradition. It's I don't mind if you believe it. And part of me is over here screaming, like, no, this does incredible harm to the world, which stands at odds with everything that you profess to say you follow about this man's teachings. So I'm living in this interesting space, and I think maybe a lot of Christian or Jesus followers, whatever you want to call yourselves, are feeling that about America right now because we're mad about what's happening with fascism. We're mad that's what's happening with ICE, and a lot of us weren't sad to see Charlie Kirk go. Like I'm against death, but like okay, one less fascist in the world. Like, what a horrible, violent way to end. But like, so how do you reconcile these two things? How do you? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that. And if you want to give me some spiritual counseling later, please let me know.
Listen, I can empathize with you because I just watched 45 minutes of the January 6th video footage that the New York Times
Mhm.
assembled. And kudos to the Times because they took all of the public domain body cam footage and they talked to a couple of Capitol Police. There's actually a Dropkick Murphys punk rock cop who he's a Dropkick Murphys fan. His name is Fanone. And he talks about what it's
Oh,
like to be a,
yeah.
yeah.
He interrupted the congressional hearing the other day. I
Yeah, it
think
was
that,
with
yeah.
Jake Smith, right?
So one of those white nationalist, racist. Yeah.
Right. There was a
So yeah,
senator that confronted him, and right, exactly. So he just resurfaced. So it was amazing because I had just gotten to know him through this January 6th footage, and you feel so
yeah,
surrounded by 10,000 Trump lunatics. A lot of evangelical Christians were also there,
yeah.
Catholics, right wing Catholics. They had Our Lady of Guadalupe on a banner. They had a giant cross. And the Baptist anti-fascist group did a study of January 6th, and they said the Christian nationalism is a big part of what was really going on January 6th. And unfortunately, not that I'm promoting a snuff film, but part of this New York Times video footage also shows you that you can actually watch Ashley Babbitt get shot at point blank range. This is the woman who was shot by a police officer in the Capitol, and
Mm.
it's not funny, but and I'm not in favor of people being shot, but when you're feeling the tension of 10,000 Trump people storming the Capitol, and when you see one of them get shot, you're kind of like, part of me, again, trying to be polite, trying to be balanced, but part of me is like, okay, at least at least one of them, at least they got one, at least they stopped one of them. And then you
Mm.
think like, oh, that's a terrible thing to think. That's a woman's life. And then her family sued actually and won a lawsuit. But so
Well,
just trying
I
to,
think that too. That
yeah,
like when I'm being in Europe, so me and my partner relocated to Europe, partly to
yeah,
move abroad and live abroad and get cheaper healthcare. Big thing. Um, you go around Europe and you're constantly reminded, whether here in Barcelona, or we went to Florence, we went to Munich. The fight against fascism is violent. The fight against fascism cost people their lives. I wrote about this in the Jesus movement, but there was a woman named Sophie Scholl at the University of Munich who was an 18-year-old who was like writing pamphlets against Hitler and was caught and hung and hanged, excuse me. And you're faced with that history here. It's not theoretical. it's not it's not it's not ancient history. It's like people, I'm looking out of Barcelona right now and thinking people died in the fight against Franco here. People were slaughtered in the fight against fascism here. And it's a very real thing. So it's easy, I think it's easy to say, oh, we'll turn the other cheek and, you know, and all this stuff. It's much harder to live it. I think that, just acknowledging that is more honest. Yeah, I'm going to
Yeah, I
say
think.
pat on the back to us.
Yeah, no, no. I mean, what we're sitting with right now is probably the hardest question to sit with. Is Jesus does call for radical nonviolence, and people like Cesar Chavez, Martin Luther King, Dorothy Day, Mahatma
Mhm.
Gandhi, Father John Deere. These are people that all say yes, yes to anti-fascism and no to a violent response to fascism. What's your take?
Yeah, I'm with Jesus. I'm with Jesus. I think the hard line there is just like, okay, uh, does that mean taking all sorts of like, do you not never defend yourself? Um, I used to think I could die for my country, but I could never kill for my country.
Right,
I don't think
right.
that anymore, but that's sort of along the ways that, not that I couldn't kill, I wouldn't kill for any notion, really, not just a bullshit nationalist idea.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's
I
going
don't know,
back
but
going back to Morton Smith, the Columbia scholar. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. Maybe I'll
yeah,
put a pin
no.
in. I'm going to put a pin in me, and then just let you finish.
But I mean, just to think that, like, I grew up going to church, the Battle Hymn of the Republic. There was
It's a great song.
yeah, it is a tremendous great time. But what is it doing in the hymnal? Like,
Yeah,
there were American flags, and it was not nobody thought twice about it. Like nobody. I don't know what it was like when you were growing up, but like
Hosanna
it
is a
was seen
battle
as
cry.
weird.
I learned. I think I
Yes,
learned
yeah,
from your writing, your latest Substack, that Hosanna was a battle
yeah,
cry.
yeah. That's right. That's right. So I don't know, and I think we're in scary times, and uh, yeah,
I was going to tell you, talking about I will die for my country, but I will not kill for my country. I think Jesus probably said something very similar. I will die for the people, but I won't kill for my people or kill for any people. Because Morton Smith in Jesus the Magician talks a lot about John the Baptist being assassinated and that there's an Egyptian necromancy,
hmm
death magic that Jesus may have known about, and that if John the Baptist is assassinated and becomes a martyr for
hmm
the people, that then somebody can step in and say, "I'm John the Baptist. I am taking his reputation and his
hmm
legacy and his mantle." And I think comrades in revolutionary movements can learn this, and I think they already do this. That, like, presente, the martyr's name, presente, Alex Preddy,
Sure.
presente. I'm taking
Yeah.
on. I will become the nonviolent resistor, the camera. I will become the camera that he held, and
Yeah.
yeah, and so,
Well, I
so
think that's an interesting point because so what I focus on a lot as we talk about the historical Jesus, and more than likely, Jesus would never had a trial before Pilate. Like that just didn't happen. Like there's no record of anybody else having a trial. That's a literary invention. And we know from other non-Christian sources that Pilate was quick to execute anybody he saw as a threat. And the turning over the tables incident is is a pretty good reason to execute somebody. That it was during Passover, there were tens of thousands of people there. This would have caught the eye of the Roman authorities. So the question is, well, Jesus clearly saw himself as a leader in this coming kingdom. So Jesus' main message was the coming kingdom of God. What role did Jesus see himself in bringing that about? And had Jesus's movement continued past his nascent ministry in Jerusalem, what would have happened next? I mean, Pilate murdered him to make sure we didn't find out. But we know that other people tried to lead violent rebellions against Rome, and including after Jesus' death, of course, the Romans destroy and kick the Jews out of Jerusalem and Judea, within 100 years of Jesus' death. So I think it's an interesting question. Was Jesus truly nonviolent? And I'm sure some scholars probably schedule this or see me study this, And then the other part is just conjecture. What would have happened if Jesus didn't die? I don't know. Nobody knows, of course, but that's what's interesting.
I think a radical scholar could also say, what is the influence of Buddhism? It was there
Oh, yes.
possibly along the Silk Road evangelical Buddhists coming from the East. We know Ashoka in the 3rd century BC, before the Common Era, BCE. Ashoka sent out missionaries, and was all
Yeah.
about
Mhm.
spreading the Dharma. And the Dharma also included nonviolence. I mean, where did Jesus get the idea that nonviolence could work? That nonviolence actually would be the solution in the long run? And
Yeah. And that while there's no, to my knowledge, there's no documented connection between any Jesus, there's no connection from Jesus to any sort of official connection to Buddhist teaching or thinking or whatever. You do have to ask the question, where did these ideas come from? Because Jesus wasn't the first person to come up with them. So where did he hear about them? In a world where there is no internet and the cell phone in everybody's pocket, where did this idea come from? This he had to get it from somebody. We don't know. It might have come from John. We don't know. I mean, John, of course, didn't leave any writings behind either.
it was the
But
walking monks, the monks
there you
that
go.
walked from Texas to Palestine.
Well, Marcus Borg actually put together a book comparing the sayings and teachings of Jesus and the Buddha. And the most notable one to me, off the top of my head, was the Buddha said something, I think in his final sermon, "You are the light of the world."
Yeah. Be lamps unto yourselves. That was one of the
Yes,
last things the Buddha said.
yes. Which
Very
sounds a
good.
whole lot like you, the light of the world, which I think in the Synoptic sounds a lot like that. You are the light of the world. And then in John becomes, I am the light.
Right, right, right,
But I
right,
don't know if
right.
there's a documented paper connection there. So that I could be told, I'm just drawing connections in English that may not be there. So I don't speak biblical Greek and I don't speak whatever, Sanskrit.
Pali, the Pali
Pali, yes.
canon was, yeah, knowing a little bit about that, since I do have a Zen practice for 15
Yes.
years. I'm also learning a lot of the Quakers in my Quaker meeting. Like if you dig a little, if you scratch the surface, like these old timers are like, oh yeah, I've also been practicing Zen for 20 or
Yeah.
25 years. You're like, what?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
this
There's
has
a lot of
been
overlap there.
This has been so great. Boswell, Five Gospels, Borg, Jesus, Buddha. I'm taking great notes, Andrew. I'm learning so much from you. I'm looking forward to our event together on Zoom and in person in New York City, February 22nd. Let me just remind our listeners, we've got some other great lefty Jesus people. We have Amanda from Catholic Worker. We have Mara Sarji from Christians for a Free Palestine. Mara is a Palestinian liberation theologian from Princeton Theological. Get this, Andrew. She was born in Nazareth.
I love it.
So I said to her, can
Yeah.
anything good come from Nazareth? I was like, have you heard that before? She was like, I get that all the time. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And then, of
Yeah.
course, we have Reverend John Tatamanal from Union Theological also on the 22nd of February. So I have to plug that because I'm doing a lot of podcasts this week and I'm getting the word out. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just say this too? I mean, one of the other parts of this tension is, I want to throw away Christianity completely and say, you people don't follow these teachings, because the people who follow, in my experience, the people who follow Jesus's words most completely are, Catholic nuns and
Yep.
monks that really take the call to poverty seriously. Like
Yeah.
it's not hyperbole to them, and they take it and they live it every day. So
Yeah.
like you said about the Catholic worker movement, and that, I know some Franciscan friars and so forth who are conservative theologically. I had a mentor who said, my theological conservativeness makes me a social liberal.
I was going to tell you that I'm, of course, ex-Catholic and critical of Catholicism and its homophobia and its
Mm.
male domination. And I really believe that the Catholic Church is due for a major social internal revolution someday. And we see it from films like Spotlight or the film about the papacy with the
John
cardinals.
Lithgow, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I can forget the name of it. I'm talking
yeah,
about.
yeah, yeah. Conclave.
Conclave,
We
yes.
see it, yeah, and I was just in Florence for a week and reading about the Medici and Pope Julius II, the warrior pope who led troops to
Mhm.
invade Bologna. You're like, what the fudge? I was never taught this in 12 years of Catholic
Yeah,
school. They could have taught me so much more. But
yeah.
I'll say this: props to my Catholic education for teaching us that the Bible is not literally true. The Bible is
Mhm.
spiritually true. You can't look for the letter of the law, you have to look for the spirit of the law. And this kind of makes you a little bit antinomian in the sense of and a little bit free thinking, a little bit anarchistic, because you have to use your inner light. You have to use what Quakers call, the process of discernment and settling down and, finding out what's true for you. And if you become a literalist and you're hitting people over the head with the Bible and saying it's all literally true, you're kind of contradicting yourself because there's so much stuff in John that's not in Mark, right?
Right. Right. Well, I think that like what everybody does and what they won't admit. So I hate this argument. They say, well, you cherry pick stuff out of the Bible because the truth is we all do. That's what you just said. Like there are so many internal contradictions, because these are written in different places at different times for different audiences. And not to mention, like Paul disagrees with himself because he, like the rest of us, they evolve. You start thinking, you think one thing one day, you think another thing another day, you write down something 15 years apart from each other. You don't think this shit's going to be still read 2000 years ago. So but what we do is we pick something and we filter our entire perception through that filter. And for so many conservative Christians, which doesn't make any fucking sense to me, it's John 3:16. Whereas I think for a lot of progressive Christians I know or Jesus followers, people that wouldn't claim would say, no, I look at the greatest commandment. That's the point. Um, and so I think it's more intellectually honest instead of saying this is the truth, to say, no, this is where I'm coming from. It's part of the reason that I have such a problem with objective news media. You're not fucking objective. Even not taking a side is taking a side.
Yeah, yeah. But for our listeners who might not have the greatest commandment paraphrased in their head right now, why don't you give us your paraphrase of the Jesus's greatest commandment? He was asked
Yeah.
in public on
In
the
fact,
spot, "What is the greatest commandment?"
in fact, in Luke, he's asked. This is why I love Luke. So maybe I would just pick Luke, and I've heard progressives say that before. So I just use the Gospel of Luke. He's asked, "What's the way to eternal life?" And that's the specific question in Luke. And he says to love the Lord God with all your heart and soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself, which of course is pulling from the Hebrew um, Bible. And I'm thinking Hillel, the Jewish scholar Hillel, who was teacher Hillel around the same time as Christ, said that's the whole point of the Torah is the greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart and soul and to love your neighbor as yourself. That's the whole Torah. So that was an idea that was out there floating around. But I just want to go back to that. If you go back and look at Luke, the question is not the question is not just some nebulous how do I live my life? It's how do I have eternal life? Or how do I like it's a very specific thing that gets thrown away because it negates 3:16, John 3:16.
How does it negate John 3:16?
The Jesus says, whoever believes in whoever believes in me shall have eternal life. Whereas the answer in Luke is no, you've got to do this ethically. Like it's clear in the synoptic gospels that Jesus finds entering the kingdom of God, the coming kingdom, the central part of his message is an ethical requirement.
Right.
There is a test. There will be a test. It is easier for a rich man to get through the eye of a needle than to go to heaven. John doesn't have that ethical test. John starts to strip away that sort of like the question here isn't how good you lived your life,
Hmm.
it's more of this. It's I'm not an expert on this, but and you could probably write your thesis on this. The distinction between what are the requirements for Jesus into entering the kingdom in the Synoptic Gospels, and what are the requirements in John, and they are very different.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. John is more cerebral and more poetic, but probably a little bit less political.
Oh sure, oh sure. And I mean, I think, and that's a normal thing too. When we meet these texts where they are, and we think about the people who wrote them, they were honest to themselves and they were trying to survive. If they wrote down what Jesus actually said, they could end up killed just like Jesus. Like, why wouldn't you blame a minority that everybody didn't like already, the Jewish people, and say, hey, give the Caesar what Caesar? I'm not challenging you. I want to live,
Hmm.
right? Because Rome didn't suffer threats. Rome was not about, much like the United States. Like, if you are a threat to the United States capitalism, we will kill you.
Yeah.
Right? Rome is the same way.
Right. Right.
And I had a professor, you know, a Hebrew Bible professor, Joel Baden, who said something to the effect of, it's funny when Americans read the Bible that they always think of themselves as like the Hebrews, but it's like, oh no, you're Egypt. Like, Egypt, that's right. You are Rome. You have more in common with Rome and Egypt than you do with the lost tribes of Israel.
Right. Right. Everybody loves the underdog.
You are not the underdog.
Great. Andrew, it's been so great. It's top of the hour here, so we probably should wrap up. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about? People can contact you through the Jesus Movement Substack, and you're also running Notice News. What's your platform? How do people subscribe to Notice News?
Yeah, we're on all the social platforms. We cover the day of news from a leftist, progressive angle. If you like Donald Trump, you will not be a fan of our coverage, but I doubt you'll listen to this podcast. But go subscribe, jesusmovementlife.org, or we'll take you to my Substack, jesusmovementlife.org.
Yeah.
And come say hi. Yeah.
The Jesus Movement on Substack, I find the articles to be well written and well researched and well presented. And Andrew is reading all the same books that I'm reading, and so it's like we're brothers, and it's great. So thank you so much for your collaboration today. It was like a Quaker meeting for worship, because I felt like we're in the light and we're speaking from the heart, and we're trying to connect to that of God in each other, and really kind of wrestling with all the detritus of history, and trying to find a gem of truth about Jesus that can help liberate our society from the iron grip of insanity. So thank you, Andrew.
Amen.
From
Amen.
the heart.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show, Monks and Punks. So February 22nd, come online, or come in New York City. Come on down, 15 Rutherford Place. The Quaker meeting, that is where we are gathering on the 22nd of February at 1 o'clock. The free lunch, the feeding of the 5,000 will start at 12:30 with mamoons, falafel, and shawarma, and lamb. And the event is at 1 o'clock with great speakers. And Andrew will be there on Zoom from Barcelona. All right, I'm going to sign off and go to work now. I have to go build stuff. All right. Mwah. Bye. Peace and love. Power hates the truth when it comes from below. This channel is about how people fight power in politics, in religion, in the streets, and in everyday life. We cover democratic socialist races, Palestine, and the genocide in Gaza, Quaker resistance, peace work, and the long tradition of nonviolence that refuses to disappear. Because politics doesn't only live in elections, it lives in housing, in labor, in building things with your hands, in culture, and sometimes in loud, unapologetic punk rock. At the center of this work is the Monks and Punks podcast, a podcast about fighting power with all your heart. If you care about politics, Palestine, peace and nonviolence, housing justice, culture, or building a life that doesn't bow to power, this channel is for you. This is not commentary for spectators. It's for people who still believe ideas and human courage can change things.